Hello everyone, today is 4th of January. My name is Sahil and welcome to the newspaper analysis. Friends, today into the GS folder, we will be taking a quote from the French philosopher Montesquieu, who had given the theory of the separation of powers. He says, the tyranny of a prince in an oligarchy is not as much dangerous to the public welfare as the apathy of a citizen in a democracy. And guys, such indifferent attitude has also been called as the democratic apathy syndrome. Now, it has been said that if the citizens in a democracy they not raise their political voice at the right time, they don't participate into the electoral politics and don't pitch for the political change when the state fails to uphold the principles of the natural justice, then such precedence or attitude is the most dangerous thing which can plague a democracy, and it is even more dangerous than the tyranny of a prince in an oligarchy. Now guys, we can utilize this particular quote into the GS paper number 2 in the topics related to the constitutionalism, as well as it can also be utilized into the paper onto the essay. So guys, that's all about this particular quote. I hope you have understood it, and now we will be taking up the newspaper analysis. Now, guys, taking up the first news article, it has been taken from the Hindu newspaper, and here you can see that India had approved the two COVID-19 vaccines for the emergency use. Now, guys, what has happened? The CDSCO, that is the Central Drug Standards Control Organization, had given the principal approval to the Covishield, the vaccine which is being developed by the Serum Institute of India, and to the Covaxin, that is the vaccine developed by the Bharat Biotech Institute. Now, guys, taking up some basic information, the CDSCO it is headed by the Drug Controller General of India, and the CDSCO as well as DCGI both comes under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Now, talking about the approval that has been given, so it is the restricted use approval under the emergency conditions. So right now it has been said that approximately 3 crore frontline health workers and staffs will be given such kind of a vaccine. Now, this particular development has been called positive on many of the fronts, but guys, there are some concerns also. What are the concerns? We can see that the Covishield, the vaccine developed by the Serum Institute, it is said that it is having the efficacy of 70.4%. But guys, this particular efficacy rate has been given onto the basis of the trials that have been conducted into the UK as well as into the Brazil. Into the Indian conditions, the trials have not been completed, and the detailed report of the phase 3 has not been made yet public by the Covishield. And the same thing goes for the Bharat Biotech also. Guys, even they had not completely recruited all the volunteers for the phase 3 trials, and even the minutes of the subject expert committee which met for 2 days and finally gave the approval, its minutes, that is what were the recommendations decisions that were taken, it has also not been made public. So the issue or the concern that has come is the huge opacity which has been shown by the government in giving the approval to the COVID-19 vaccine. Guys, it has been said that the Pfizer as well as the Moderna, which are the major giants, have rolled the vaccine into the countries such as the US and UK. They had given at least the preliminary report with respect to the efficacy in both the US as well as the UK, but in India such a thing has not been done. Now guys, why this particular thing is problematic? It is because of two things. Number one, right now we are seeing that already the vaccine hesitancy has came into the people, and this vaccine hesitancy will further be increased if such opacity will be assumed. Then guys, the second problem that is coming, it is that still the double blinded placebo trials have to be conducted. Now, what are this double blinded placebo trials? It means that there will be large number of people which will be appointed or recruited. Half of these people will be given the actual vaccine, half of the people will be given a placebo. Now, placebo is simply a mock drug. It means it is not a drug, it is just a kind of a sugary solution or any such kind of thing will be given. And then the development will be noted into all of these people, and it will be seen that whether the ones who were given the vaccine they are responding well than the ones who were given the placebo. And if yes, the vaccine ones are doing well, then the vaccine is effective, and then the efficacy rate of the vaccine is calculated. Now, these double blinded placebo trials have have not been completed, and the problem is this, that even now it will be turning very difficult to invite the volunteers to come into this double blinded placebo trial, because earlier there might be an incentive for him that they can get a vaccine and they themselves will be safeguarded. But guys, when the volunteers they have more assurity to get a actual dose of vaccine into the vaccination drive, then why they will come and participate into the placebo trials just to get the vaccine, where the chance of getting a vaccine is only 50%, and the 50% chance is to actually get a placebo. So even the trials will suffer. Therefore, in these extraordinary times when the people are shattered and the public confidence is at the lowest level, government should come out with the acute transparent practices and should not be resorting to such kind of opacity. So guys, such is the kind of outlook that has been provided into these particular articles. I hope that you have understood it, and now we'll be moving to the next article. Now, guys, this article has been taken from the Mint newspaper, and it is talking how democracies can counter the China syndrome. Now, guys, before taking this particular article, let's see that what do we understand by the China syndrome. Now, guys, here just focus onto this particular graph. You can see that China's global trade surplus, the more the export that the China is doing, it is continuously increasing from 2018 to 2020. Now, guys, this 2020 was the year of pandemic, and even now, the China's trade surplus has increased. Moreover, China is the only major economy into the world in 2020 which has registered a positive growth rate. And guys, here you can see the expected GDP into the trillion dollars into the coming years. And clearly, we can see that by 2035, China will outpace all the major economies. And guys, even this particular trend will be visible earlier also. By 2030 also, the China will be surpassing the USA. And this particular thing has now concerned the countries across the world. Why? It is not the case that earlier no superpower has been there. There have been the superpowers, but those superpowers were the responsible nations. But the China's attitude has been different into the preceding years. For example, if we see the China's neighborhood policy, then what China is doing, number one, into the South China Sea, China has taken up the dominant position and had compromised with the claims of the less powerful nations, and the claims of the Philippines, Malaysia, etc. has not been endorsed. Then, guys, the same kind of attitude is towards the terrestrial borders also, and we can see this particular thing onto the LAC, that how China is showing the unilateralism. Further, you can see that the China is also have taken up a new playbook where the China is going with the debt trap diplomacy. Now, the example of the debt trap diplomacy is very much visible into the Sri Lanka, where the China gave the unprecedented aid and in return had taken up the 99-year lease of the Hambantota port, and now the Sri Lanka is relenting their decision. Now, such a thing, the China is also trying to play into the Nepal, into the Maldives, and the China's scramble, the neo scramble of Africa, is simply the debt trap policy that the China is undertaking. Further, guys, China has also emerged out to be following the wolf warrior diplomacy, where Chinese diplomacy is not soft and subtle, rather it has been abrasive, abusive, derogatory onto all such kind of terms, and this particular thing has been observed by the other nations. Further, guys, China's unilateral attitude can also be seen by the imposition of the national security legislation onto the Hong Kong, by giving the kind of warnings to the Taiwan with respect to the one China one principle policy. After that, there have been now very clear reports that the China is taking a dominant position onto the MNCs of the China, and it is basically using the data harvested by the MNCs for their own strategic purposes. Into this particular direction, the Huawei, the company which is offering the 5G services, they are also having a substantial claim into them by the Chinese government. After that, the immense economic clout that has been gained by the China, particularly into the present times, we can see the trade surplus here. It is a matter of concern. Then, guys, after this, the present pandemic of COVID-19, it got originated into the China, but at the end of the day, China was also the country which got the maximum advantage out of it. And up till now, there have been no investigation as what was the origin of the COVID-19, and even the China is not cooperating onto that particular front. And finally, guys, we can take the example of this development. Now, guys, this article has been taken from the today's The Hindu newspaper, and here we can see that China had amended their defense law. Now, let's understand that what it is. See, into the China, there is a national defense law which regulates the Chinese defense concerns. Now, it has been amended, and more greater power has been given to the Central Military Commission, which can mobilize even more resources for the national interest. And now, guys, what exactly is national interest? That particular thing has not been properly defined, so the resource authority has also been accumulated by the amendment. Now here, guys, we can see that the amendments, they have said that the scope of the key security fields, it is not just the land border, maritime borders and air defense, but it also includes the outer space, the electromagnetic networks. So we can see that the China is clearly turning very much offensive, and China has even well stated public goals to make the PLA, People's Liberation Army of China, to make a world class military unit on par with the United States by 2049, the time when the China will be turning 100. So they basically, all these particular things dictate that the China has turned offensive. So therefore, now this China syndrome is to be countered, and onto that particular direction, the US President elect Joe Biden had proposed the coalition of the like-minded countries. Now, like-minded countries will actually be the democracies which are also fed up with the Chinese attitude or the China syndrome. Now, guys, into this particular coalition, a much important role has to be played by India and the neighboring countries, particularly India's dispute with the LAC, India's long border with the China, and India's position into the neighborhood can make India a very important player. However, along with the India, the countries such as the Australia, Japan, they will be playing an important role. Now, even earlier also, this particular thing was recognized by the Donald Trump, that the China is going to be very much offensive, and this particular thing was clear from the fact that how the into the times of the Donald Trump, the Hawaii war, the trade war, the 5G war, etc., they were very much rampant. But what is different now than the last time was that the Donald Trump was never willing to form a coalition and to give a equal footing to the countries such as India. But the Joe Biden had now publicly stated that a coalition of like-minded countries will be made, and here much more important possibility is that the India will be playing the role as a equal partner. So now this is a time that India can leverage this particular position and can carve a distinct way out of for its own into the Asia Pacific. So guys, that's all about this particular article, and now we'll be moving to the next article. Now, this particular article has been taken from the Business Standard, and here we can see some of the important aspects that why government will not be able to meet the deadline with respect to the Plastic Waste Management Act of 2016. First of all, what has happened? The Plastic Waste Management Act provided that government needs to take the step as how the plastic waste generation can be reduced, and after that the single use plastic was to be completely be eliminated by 2022, and now we have entered into the 2021, but it looks that such a kind of a thing might not be possible. Guys, here you can see the major plastic waste generators, and here the states such as the Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Gujarat, they are producing the substantial amount of plastic waste. And when we talk about eliminating the single use plastics, the most important or the big challenge comes from the FMCG, that is the moving consumer goods industry. because they use the plastics into their multi-layered packaging and particularly into the sachets for storing the goods such as the tobacco, chocolates, biscuits, chips, liquids. And if the single use plastic will be eliminated, these particular products will not be available. Moreover guys, cost effective packaging of many of these FMCG goods are particularly possible because of the plastic. Just take the example of the shampoo sachets, detergent pouches, biscuit packs, the items which are being produced for less than 5 rupees. Now they will not be able to be offered if the single use plastics will be eliminated. Moreover, guys, it has been said that the 53,000 crore plus segment is based onto the plastic industry. Now the plastic industry is also giving the job to more than 1.3 million people, and there are 10,000 firms which are completely dependent onto the plastic manufacturing. And if any kind of a ban onto this particular aspect will come, then there will be the huge economic implications onto that particular aspect. Though at the same time, India had also taken up the sustainable developmental goals, under which the environment conservation as well as the responsible consumption is to be promoted, but at the same time there are the economic cost also. So guys, this is a kind of a dilemma that India is facing. So that's all guys, we can utilize such a kind of a data into the questions related to the GS paper number 3 under the environment versus economy dilemma. So guys, that's all, and now we'll be moving to the next article. Now, this particular article has been taken from the Mint newspaper, and it is talking about the big convergence challenge that India is facing right now. So let's understand that what this challenge is. See guys, first of all, the convergence challenge means that there comes a time when the different forces they come together and they lead to a new and a bigger phenomena. Let's see this thing by the help of an example. Around the 2000 we faced a kind of a convergence that the telecom, information technology and broadcasting, all of them were coming together. And by 2010 this convergence led to the rise of the social media, which was being driven by the high speed broadnet internet and was directly being delivered onto the smartphones. Now by 2010 there was the problem which came that okay, social media has come. Now the battle comes that how is thus this social media is to be regulated. That was the challenge which was thrown by this particular convergence. Now guys, today also a big convergence is going on, that is the technology, health, society and geopolitics, they are being converged together. And we can see this by the help of an example. See, today the people are wearing the smart watches or the smart wristbands, and they are capable of giving the electrocardiogram, ECG reports. They can give the blood oxygen readings and all such kind of thing. What it is the convergence of the technology as well as the health. After that, people are using the robotic vacuum cleaners at the home, and driving vehicles, self-driven cars, etc. are being used. What it is the convergence of the technology as well as the day-to-day appliances and the transportation. But the problem is coming that so much convergence is happening, but we don't know that where this convergence will be manifesting into the next decade. Moreover, there is also one thing that the convergence is not being leveraged properly into the governance. Now it has been said that even in today's time, the 19th century mindset is leading the governance structures in India. If we see today the governance structures, it is divided into the ministries and the portfolios, and all these ministries had converted themselves into the vertical silos, and these ministries are not converging with each other. Today just we have renamed the ministries under the different names. For example, the Ministry of Environment got changed into the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and likewise. But even today if we see the three ministries, that is the Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Health and Ministry of Science, are different, and they are operating as different silos rather than converging together as today the technology has done. So guys, there is a kind of a immediate need that the governance needs to be changed into the present times and needs to get converged in order to reap the benefit of the coming times. Now, guys, here if we take a reference from the Pooja Mehra, the writer who wrote the book The Lost Decade 2008 to 2018, she has described into the book that the period after the 2010 was when the India had the growth but not the story. So it had said that India did not learn the convergence that were coming when the 21st century started and therefore had paid the cost. And now such kind of things need not to be repeated again, and we need to decide that how the world is going to change and how we need to fit governance structures, our economies, our diplomacy in such kind of change and convergences. So guys, that's all about this particular article, and now we'll be moving to the next article. Now guys, this particular article has been taken from the Business Standard, and it is talking about the slow justice that is prevalent in India and how this particular thing is leading to many ramifications onto the different front. First of all, let's see the data with respect to the justice speed in India. So guys, according to the data given by the National Judicial Data Grid, it has been said that there are approximately 500,000 cases that are pending into the High Court for 5 years or more, and there are even 250,000 cases that are pending for more than 10 years. And when we go to the lower levels, that is the district court and taluka court, there are at least 6 million cases that are pending for 5 years or more, and 2.5 million cases are pending for more than 10 years. And if we actually take the all cases that are pending across all the courts, then more than 4.5 crore cases are pending into the India. And this particular thing is leading to cost, frustration, and the lack of justice to large number of people. Now, let's analyze that what are the reasons for such a slow justice delivery. The reason number one is is that India is following the common law system, or we are the common law country onto the lines of the Britain. Now, under the common law, basically all the judgments or all the decisions that has been made by the court, they will be binding for the future and for all the times to come. And along with this, one particular thing is also there, that the decrees or the judgments given by the higher court, they are binding onto the lower court, and the lower court cannot subverse them. Now, what happens whenever any judgment or any decision is to be taken, the court has to see all the precedents that has been given into the past, all the judgments have been given into the past, and every judgment can only be given after that it is not running contrary to the earlier given judgments or earlier given orders. Moreover, guys, when the court is sitting, then the even counsel or the lawyers, they need to study the precedents that has been given onto the past, and only onto the basis of those past precedents they can put forward their arguments, and they can make the claims for the defense in front of the court. And it is actually said that because of such kind of a system, there is huge time that is to be taken by the court in giving their actual verdict, as well as the time was also to be taken to prepare for the case. And along with it, there comes an added problem, that is the lack of infrastructure that is there into the Indian judiciary, due to which the judgments and the rulings even came at a slower pace. But now, at least on one part, the problems are being able to be solved, that is onto the infrastructural aspect. Now, what change has come? The change has been brought by the pandemic of the COVID-19. However, guys, I would like to make this thing very clear that even before the pandemic of COVID-19, the actions were taken. For example, the e-court initiative was floated, which was working since 2005, and it aimed to cover 15,000 courts in India. However, what happened after the pandemic of COVID-19? Actually, the things started to move very much fast, and the new phenomena of the virtual courts came, where the proceedings were held using the tools such as the Zoom. Here, the plaintiff lawyer, the defendant lawyer, the judges, as well as the witnesses, they can come together onto the virtual mode, and it saved a large number of time into the traveling, it saved large number of efforts, and ultimately it made justice more fast and efficient. Moreover, guys, there are other examples also as how the technology is making the justice more faster. So we can take example that, guys, as I have told you that that the past judgments have to be studied before giving the ruling. So guys, there is the All India Reporter which was to be studied. Now this All India Reporter carries the past judgments, and they were earlier presented into the text format, and manually they were to be searched. But guys, today what has happened, these All India Reporters, factors they have been made available into the online version, and there are various websites which are providing these online searchable databases. And now much of the time is saved, because rather than searching manually, the past judgments can be searched into a very swift and digital manner. So guys, these are some of the interventions which have been came, and they are now actually making the justice more faster. However, still the efforts are needed to be made by the government, that actually more streamlining of the technology with the judiciary can be made. So guys, that is all about this particular article, and now we'll be moving to the next article. Now, guys, this particular article has been taken from the Hindu newspaper, and it is saying that we should not ignore the women farmers, as they are one who are playing the most important role into the agriculture. Now, if we take the data from the agricultural census, then we can see that approximately 73.2% of the rural women, they are engaged into the farming activities, but at the same time only 12.8% land holding are held by the women. And what is the reason for that particular thing? Number one, there are the cultural factors. The cultural factors pertains to the patriarchal structure of Indian society, where it is believed that the male is the inheritor of the property, and therefore the even agricultural property is transferred from male to male. After that, there are other kind of stereotypes where the women are not given the leadership position and all such kind of thing. According to the Indian Human Development Survey report, it has been said that 83% of the agricultural land in the country is inherited by male, and only 2% of the land is inherited by the female counterparts. And the condition of the women agricultural laborers among the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe community is even more problematic. Guys, we can see that among all the agricultural laborers, 81% of women agricultural laborers belong to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. So particularly the women into the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe community, they are more vulnerable, they are not having the income realization, and they are more prone to the poverty. So therefore it has been said that we should not ignore the women farmers. Particularly this appeal is right now being made under the aegis of the new farm law that has been implemented by the government. Now what the problem is coming, see, the problem is this, that number one, government had not given the MSP, and here government had provided into the new laws that the farmers, they can agree enter into the contract with the corporates and can sell their produce to them. Now the question comes that when the women farmers are there, number one, they are not educated to such an extent that they can negotiate the contract effectively. Number two, the bargaining power of the women is also very much restricted in getting such kind of conditions under the contract which will benefit them more, and it ultimately will be leaving the women onto the mercy of the corporate sectors, and their exploitation will further come. So guys, under the agricultural reforms that are coming, the feminine aspect needs to be understood, and adequate protection needs to be given to the women agricultural laborers. So this is the entire message that has been given into this particular article. So guys, that's it, and now we'll be moving to the next article. Now, guys, here we can see that an amendment has carried into the FSSAI, that is the Food Security and Standard Authority of India, where the maximum amount of the trans fatty acid that can be allowed into the oil as well as other kind of foods, they have been restricted. Now, guys, first of all, what are these trans fatty acids? So they are the harmful fats which are basically manufactured artificially, as well as they are also naturally present into some of the food items. Now guys, much quantity of the trans fatty acids is artificially manufactured, and it gives a kind of a feel of the natural fats, but it is very much harmful to the effect or onto the health. It poses the cardiovascular diseases, heart diseases, and many of the, and also it raises the cholesterol level, which chokes the heart and is responsible for many of the deaths. According to the WHO, 5.4 lakh people are dying every year due to these trans fatty acids which are being made into the industries. And guys, there is the target which has been taken by the WHO, that is the global elimination of the trans fatty acids by 2023. Now, into the packaged goods as well as into the junk food, there is large amount of the trans fatty acid which is found, and it is very much bad for the health. So guys, it has been said by the government that the maximum permissible amount of the trans fatty acid, it needs to be restricted to 3% in 2021, as well as it needed to be further reduced to 2% by the 2022. Now guys, for the first time, India came out with the policy to regulate the trans fatty acids in 2001, where the limit of 10% was imposed. Then it was reduced to 5% in 2015, and right now it is standing at the 5%, but now further 3% in 2021 and 2% in 2022 is to be taken up. Now guys, I give you the reference from the Lancet Health Journal, which is the most reputed health journal into the world. It says that the lifestyle diseases are today the silent killers, and these lifestyle diseases are the non-communicable diseases, which leads to the problems such as diabetes, heart strokes, cardiovascular disease, etc. And into these lifestyle non-communicable disease, trans fatty acids are number one killers. So therefore, this government's move is very good onto the health front that the government is taking up. So guys, that's all about this particular article, and now we will be moving to the next article. Now guys, here just we can see a very brief update. This article has been taken from the Hindu newspaper. What has happened now? The 12 senators, they are opposing the Joe Biden's victory. Now they belong basically to the Republican Party, to which the Donald Trump belonged. And as the Donald Trump is saying that the fraud has happened into the elections and he doesn't approves of the new president elect, so the senators who are loyal to the Donald Trump, they are calling that a 10-day audit needs to be called to see whether the elections were held into the fair and free manner or not, and they are restrict the usual activity of the Congress. However, guys, you don't need to go too much into the detail into this particular article, because as the 20 January will come on to the inauguration day, there is the sworn in of the new president elect, and after that all these things will be coming to an end. So guys, just a brief update that we need to see here. So guys, that's all about the today's important articles. I hope that you have understood it. Thank you so much.